Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. How lovely to see you all here. Back at New Hall, back at Mary Edwards. Well, I am Rachel Polonsky, and I have been in the role of acting president of the college for precisely 5 days. So be with me. It's been coming at me fast. It's a great honor for me, and I'm going to talk to you more about the college and all our plans before dinner. But before that, we have an enormous privilege in the presence of Sarah Solemani, our alumna from the class of the matriculation year of 2002, who graduated in 2005 and has gone on to an illustrious career, which I'll talk more about in one moment. But before that, I have various items to tell you, just a run through of what you will expect to happen in the course of this evening. So for an hour, Sarah will be with us, and that is going to be fascinating. And she will describe how she envisages this, and it will include some Q&A and participation from you, we very much hope. And then please remain in your seats while we do a quick stage shift ready for a musical performance by alumna Annabelle Beniston from the matriculation year of 2022, who's going to play for us. And after that, please make your way over to the main college for a drinks reception in the main walkway. And I've been told multiple times, cocktails in the library, which are going to be something special. So now I am going to tell you a little bit about Sarah. You probably know quite a bit about her already, but I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of her resume and then hand over to Sarah, who's flown in from Los Angeles to be with us today and has already been enveloped by her classmates from 2002, which has been delightful to see. So Sarah began her acting career in the theatre at the age of 16 and performed critically acclaimed plays in the West End, the National Theatre, the Almeida and the Royal Court, among others. She began writing her own material during her time at Cambridge and would perform comedy shows above pubs and around the country, including 5 original shows at the Edinburgh Comedy Festival. Her plays have been produced throughout the UK and at the Public Theatre New York and translated into several languages. She has appeared in 40 TV shows and films, including the UK hit Him and Her, for which she won a Royal Television Society Award for Best Actress. And recently, she played Miranda, Renee Zellweger's best friend in Bridget Jones' franchise, for which she was nominated for an Evening Standard Best Actress Award. And it was a great, fun performance. Sarah moved to Hollywood in 2016 to write with Bill Hader and Alec Berg on their hit HBO show Barry, for which she won the Writers Guild of America Award for Best New Series. Her 4-part anti-fascist espionage thriller Ridley Road, which is brilliant, took the prime time slot on BBC One and was the highest rated show on PBS Masterpiece last year and is currently streaming on Amazon. Her show Chivalry, a very funny comedy dealing with sexual politics in the wake of Me Too, just aired on Channel 4, with Sarah co-creating and starring alongside Steve Coogan and Wanda Sykes. Sarah's currently working on several projects, never ceasing to develop her profile and her creative career, including a 5-part drama for ITV called The Party, and writing and directing her first feature film entitled Mango, starring Renee Zellweger, Andrea Riseborough, Melanie Lynxey, Tiffany Haddish, and Nicholas Brown. Sarah recently returned from a trip to Afghanistan with politician Fawzia Koofi, looking at the female resistance movement to the Taliban for a feature which she will write and direct. And very recently, her debut, Mashhad, about her grandmother living life as a secret Jew in Iran, has Oscar qualified for Best Live Action Short Film. So that's in just the last few weeks. So Sarah, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I want to start by just thanking everyone at the college, Murray Edwards, the college formerly known as New Hall, for inviting me to speak with you. I want to do a special shout out to Imogen Crockford, who single-handedly organized the whole Alumnae Weekend, it seems, as well as being 6 months pregnant. So thank you, Imogen. And I want to thank Dr. Polonsky for that beautiful introduction. This is her, as she says, her first week as acting president. So very brave of her to invite me to speak. And I hope this will be an explosive start to her term here. During my time studying social and political science, I saw some of the most incredible minds give some really rousing speeches. And one of them was Tony Benn, you know, the famous socialist MP. And I remember going up to him and asking him to sign my book. And he said, yes, what's your name? And I said, Sarah Solemani. And he went, where are your family from? And I said, Iran. And he went, yes. He said, where are your family now? And I went, Israel. And he went, ah. And that exchange tells you everything you need to know about being a progressive Jew from the Middle East. But as the Egyptian feminist Nawal el-Saudawi reminds us, middle of what, east of where? And she tells us that we should watch our colonial language because the term Middle East is all relative to British Empire. So Egypt is Middle East relative to London. India is Far East relative to London. So in the spirit of a new world order, I want to thank you for inviting me to travel all the way from the far west of Los Angeles to speak in the middle west of Cambridge, England. There's no question that when I walked up the hill to Newhall for my interview with Dr. Sue Benson, that she and the degree would change the course of my mind. It wasn't what to think, it was how to think, and how deeply and widely our brains could be. Sue, as we called her, was a highly accomplished socioanthropologist of Ghanaian heritage, and she did a lot of her field work in Ghana. And I later found out that she was renowned for taking in a sort of motley crew of girls from mostly state schools. And she saw something in us, and a lot of us were pulled, so we didn't apply here. We were swimming desperately to meet some boys. But she would say in the interview, you know, if there was a fire alarm in the middle of the night and everyone was evacuated, we looked like a co-ed college. So that was kind of all the reassurance I needed. But she had my number, Sue, and she said to me, you know, if I give you a place here, are you just going to do comedy and plays, or are you actually going to work? I said, oh no, I'll definitely work. And then about halfway through the first term, she called me into her office, which was a shed at the back of her garden. And she went, you're not working hard enough at all. And you got to come here every week, and I'm going to give you extra lessons because we can get your grades up. And I was very resentful. Why was she picking on me? And I remember the first essay that I gave her was about a tribe in Papua New Guinea. And it was a very complex field study, but there was one line about how the men in the tribe would take hallucinogenic drugs and beat their wives. And I wrote her a sort of 3-page essay on why domestic violence was wrong. And I remember being in her shed and her just sort of giving me this look and asking these sort of gentle questions. And the message I got loud and clear was, your moral outrage is fine, but it's not what is required of you in this moment. And I think about that all the time with social media and what we're seeing playing out on the news, that actually our moral outrage isn't what is needed of us right now. It was Sue's teaching and the SPS department which encouraged us to think deeper and harder and more critically at things that might be uncomfortable. In my last year, I called Sue because I'd got a job in a film. I got a part in a film called Mrs. Henderson Presents, which is about the first strip club in Soho. It's on most Christmases, and I get texts from people going, I'm with my entire family watching you completely naked. Merry Christmas. And I called Sue and I said, I don't know what to do because it's slap bang in the year and I'm going to miss a lot. And she said, who's directing it? And I said, Stephen Frears. And she said, well, he did My Beautiful Laundrette. You've got to do it. You've got to do it. And so I did it. What I didn't know then, that when I had that conversation with Sue, she had been diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And by the end of my year, after I finished my degree and finished the film, she had passed away. Her memorial was one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had, because it was all these academics who knew her better than I did, describing her and celebrating her and talking about her iconic beauty. And someone shared an anecdote that a gentleman asked her out for a date, and she said, only if you arrive on the streets of Cambridge on a camel. And apparently a camel was found. Oh, you know this. Was it you?
I should be still alive.
From Harrods. Okay, more of that later. But now, looking back on my life and the influence that Sue had on my life was the message she was giving me, which I didn't realize at the time, was that my intellectual life and my creative life were both to be respected, and they were both to be embraced and nourished, and they were to coexist and complement each other. And that is the message that I've taken forward in my career and in my work. And so this is what I want to invite all of us to think about tonight, because I think this is what is required of us in this moment. Not just limiting creativity to literature and the arts, but expanding our creative and imaginative capacity in all fields, in science, in maths, in medicine, in government, farming, tech, etc., etc. Now, most of us in this room are united by the huge privilege of receiving a world-class education really still as a child. And we know now that the prefrontal cortex finishes maturing at 25. So that's the impulse control and the emotional regulation. And so most of us were exposed to a really intense period of study and social connection away from our families, with a very heavy drinking culture. As children, we were children. And so when we come back to this town and we're in these walls and in these buildings, it must be very stirring for us. I know it has been very stirring for me. And maybe some of us in this room feel like we've had success, whatever that metric is. Maybe we feel we've achieved a lot of what we set out to do. Or maybe we were full of ambition and promise and big dreams, and we feel we didn't fulfill our potential. Maybe we became mothers or carers, and our professional lives took a hit or faded away. Maybe we had ill health or mental health, and our lives have been dominated by managing that. But none of that matters right now at all. Let it go, because we are all born with a creative abundance. And if you speak to any child, they'll let you know they have big plans, big ideas, big solutions. Children are all creative because all humans are creative. But slowly, over time, the myth of being a genius or not, or having talent or not, and the restrictions of institutions, of specializing young, all of these restrict and undermine our innate, creative, abundant capacity. And everyone in this room has such a capacity. It just may be easier to access for some of us than others, but it's here, it's within you. So why does it matter that we gather today and remind ourselves of our abundant creative capacity? It matters because we're meeting in a particular moment in our current world order. I've come from the US, a country undergoing massive political and social transformation. And we don't know yet what the future holds for the United Kingdom, but there is a strong possibility that it will go through an equally radical transformation. In his book, At Work in the Ruins, about the climate crisis and the fracturing of the current world order, the philosopher Dugald Hine has a mantra: The end of the world as you know it is not the end of the world. The end of the world as you know it is not the end of the world. And what he means is a way of knowing the world, and he references the concept of hospicing modernity. The way of knowing the world is breaking down, but the world is still here. You are still here. A new way of knowing the world is forming. The word crisis in Greek means to separate. It means turning point. And this is where we are right now in this moment. We're in a collective separation, and we have an opportunity to turn and change direction. I'm struck often with the language of defeat that this new era brings up in people. There's nothing we can do. There's no point. There's climate apocalypse. Tech is going to take over. Humans will be redundant. The populist strongmen are rising all over the world, etc., etc. And you don't have to look far to be convinced by the doomsday rhetoric that any contribution or action we make is futile. But that serves the tech bros and the populist strongmen just fine. And we keep on scrolling, we keep on being scared, we keep on doing nothing, and we have no participation in the new world order that is dawning. But in this moment, the mental skills that we began to cultivate at this university stand us in good stead. How to think critically, how to think independently, how to assess sources, how to question motives. Never before has the power of independent thought become so urgent and so necessary. But we must not let fear win. In every era of monumental change, new ideas, new systems, new thought, new energy is always being created. We just have to be aware of it and honor it and realize that it is within us. As part of the SPS Tripos, we studied the utopian socialists. Do you remember the utopian socialists? I've got SPS right here. They were the wealthy European industrialists who built new communities, and one I was particularly struck with was Robert Owen. He built modern communities, advocated for universal education, child labor laws, fair working conditions. He even tried to create a utopian society called Harmony in Indiana in the US, which failed magnificently. But his creativity, alongside his industrial success, helped form kind of the bedrock of our social thinking. And we can draw a line from him to things like the union movement, to fair pay movement that we know today. It's the creative capacity that charges all change. It's the belief, as ridiculous as it may seem to some of our contemporaries, that we have a hand in designing the world in which we want to live in. We don't just have to follow the tech bros and the populist strongmen like impotent, helpless lemmings. Mary Wollstonecraft, our favorite feminist thinker, was scorned and mocked and derided. She would say, those who advance beyond the time in which they live must learn to brave censure. All forward thinkers are going to be dismissed in some way until people catches on and they recognize that they were truthful. So I'm going to invite you to interact with your creative potential. And on the way in, you were given a piece of paper and a pen. And we're going to think about how we midwife a new world order. The word midwife means with woman. Okay, I'm going to give about 10 minutes. And I just want you to think, what needs to change? What in your personal or professional life have you learned that you want to transform or improve? Doesn't have to be an A-star essay. This is not going to be judged. You could put your name on it at the top if you want, or not. But the point is for you to connect with your innate creative power and assist the birth of your creative flow. So I'm going to give you some time. Happy writing. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you for doing that. We're going to collect them. Yeah, we're going to collect them. And we're not going to put anyone on the spot by having them read them out. But I hope that you connected to your inner creative force. I hope that when you leave this weekend and we all carry on with our lives, and if we are confronted, as we probably will, with a sort of continued hopeless or frightening newsfeed, I hope you remember yourself and this piece of paper, and I hope you remember that your mind belongs in designing a new world order, because the new world order is coming, and we are all a crucial part of birthing it. Thank you very much.
Sarah, thank you so much. So while the New World Order is birthing, we're just going to talk amongst ourselves. I'm going to start by just asking you a couple of questions of my own, but then I'm sure that there will be questions from the audience. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, having looked at your work, was there's humor all the way through it. There's laughter all the way through it, as well as these very serious themes that you take on, the big hot button themes at any particular moment, whether they're personal social themes or big geopolitical themes. And that's a constant in your creativity. Can you say more about laughter and humor and comedy and their importance for the world, for humanity?
Thank you. It's very funny because my friend Vicky is here, and she, do you remember she organized a fashion show? Do you remember this? And she organized a fashion show, and she said, would you model? And I said, yeah, I absolutely will model. But I want to design a dress. She went, okay, we'll sort you out. And I remember, I thought, I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm going to do a comedy bit. I'll let them think I'm a model. And she did this amazing fashion show, and I planned sort of funny monologue, and I stepped on in my outfit. And as I stepped on the stage, everyone laughed, and I hadn't said anything. And I think there's something about comedy where I don't know how much of a choice it is, to be honest. You know, especially as an actor, you want to be sort of sincere and dramatic, and people just laugh. And so you have to kind of work with what you've got. And so I knew I had a kind of comedy instinct and could do sitcoms, and I did Footlights and everything. And then started feeling that it wasn't just as fulfilling just the joke, but the joke was a very good sweetener for the medicine of something else, something bigger. And so being able to kind of sneak in some political, social stuff whilst people are entertained and laughing, to me, that's like my North Star.
So that brings me on to the question about your move, big life move in 2016, which was a turning point in the world order for sure. From UK to USA to the West Coast, and you brought with you your humor from the culture which you came from and the things that made people laugh here. What was it like? I mean, you can talk about what it was like moving on a big scale, but just in terms of those social dynamics and understandings and working creatively in that completely different environment.
Well, no one knew me at all there. I was a little bit famous. I've been on television here. And when I got to America, I was like, has anyone seen Bridget Jones? And my agent was like, no. They said, you know who everyone's obsessed with? Phoebe Waller-Smith is what they said. And I was at the bottom of the food chain. I didn't know much about Hollywood writing culture, the writer's room, the intensity of the writer's room. I was just a staffer, which is like the lowest rung you can be. And I quickly learned that you sort of want to be immunized by Hollywood, but you don't want to be diseased. So I just sort of kept working and selling shows and making stuff. And there's actually a great line in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, where she says sometimes you have to go across to go up, or sometimes you even have to go down to go up. And I think that's kind of what I did when I moved to Hollywood.
Well, it's worked out well. So what's the dream now? Which direction are you going in? Directing?
Yes, so I've started to direct things that I've written. which is a whole new hat and a whole new artistic expression. And like you mentioned, Mashhad, which is this short film I wrote about my grandmother who lived as a secret Jew in Iran. And we shot that in Los Angeles, in Farsi. We created 1930s Iran. And I directed that, and that was with children and people who just come from Iran, just escaped Iran to come to America. So that felt like a good place to be.
Well, I have many more questions, but I think I'm being selfish. So I am going to now invite questions from the audience. Now, Kiki and Lewis, I can see you hanging there with the mics. So would people put the hands up if they have a question? And the roving mic will come round. So first question there, and then one here.
I am Sarah. I'm 2005. I also work in the film industry. So, how have you found it being a smart woman in the industry with with your background, with your education, and challenging the male mindset of the whole industry? Because you really have broken ground.
Great question. When I was an actor, being clever was used against me. And I would be on set and I'd suggest something and they go, all right, Cambridge, And I learned sort of just to read the room on when to be clever and when not. But when I became a screenwriter, that completely changed. And especially actually being in Hollywood, where they want you to be the cleverest person in the room because they're going to give you tens of millions of dollars to create a show or a film. So you really got to know your stuff. And now I'm going into directing. Again, they need you to have answers to their questions. So it kind of is about how you position yourself. And that classic thing of not caring if people don't like you is a huge one, which has taken me a long time to learn. But good luck, and let's talk afterwards.
Another question. Yes, right here.
Very inspiring. Thank you. If only we can change the world. Let's hope we can. You talked about comedy with the medicine behind it, or the medicine coming through. It was a way of introducing the medicine. So I wondered how free you are to choose your topics, to choose the messages you want to give. And also, is there any way that comedy or drama can really bring more kindness into the world and more respect between people's and forgiving hearts?
Forgiving hearts.
Yes, well, I feel in families, in communities, and in war zones, we want peaceful relationships, but that requires incredible forgiveness.
Yes. Thank you. Remind me the first part of your question.
Well, it was how you choose the messages.
Yeah.
Are you free?
Yeah, free. Well, that's a great word, and that's very important to me, is my freedom to say whatever I want at any point. And that freedom comes with a certain sacrifice of, say, having they're called overall deals or first look deals you have in Hollywood, where you might be with Amazon and get paid loads of money. And I don't have any of those. I'm not with one studio. I'm not with one channel. I just represent myself. But I have a service to the audience to be entertaining. They don't want to just be bashed around the head with my propaganda. So my work is like a Trojan horse, really. In you don't even realize you're learning about, like, Ridley Road was about the fascist revival in 1962, but you just feel like you're watching a thriller, right? But the second point you made was really interesting, which is really empathy. And in Hollywood, we went to the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the SAG Awards, and Jane Fonda made an incredible speech, which you can see online. And she talked about our medium as entertainers is empathy. If you're an actor and you're playing even a serial killer, you can't judge that character. You have to understand what's the childhood background. Why are they acting like that? And so that's our currency, is empathy with everyone. And when you watch a really moving film or a really funny piece of satire, actually, I think the hardening that you have on your own worldview or the view of someone else or maybe your enemy, I think it's that artistic expression which can soften maybe a hardened heart.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, one over here.
Hello. What was it like working in Afghanistan and traveling around the country?
Oh, wow. Well, so this was a politician called Fawzia Kufi, who was the highest rated female politician in Afghanistan um, uh, for about 20 years when there was American occupied. She would regard it as liberated, but they had a quota of female politicians. And I got in touch with her because I thought it would make a very good film. And she took me back to her province, which is called Badakhshan. So there's a province which has Afghanistan and Tajikistan within it. And she hadn't been back since the collapse of the country to the Taliban. So we went together and we went to the border, and she could see her village across the river. And we really connected. So because I've got Persian roots and it's very similar to Afghan culture, and she just showed me this incredible place and these incredible people, and she would talk to all the villagers, and then she said to our driver, like, let's go, and we'll go say hello to the Taliban. And they're like, no, we're not going there. And they were, no, I know, they know me, let's go. And so, and one day, but we didn't, but we saw the Talibs from across the river. And then that same afternoon, she was like, we must do your eyebrow needs to be threaded. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I hope you get to see the film, but we have been working on for a long time.
Thank you. Another question from Joy.
What childhood experiences do you feel gave you the confidence to become your own person?
Wow. It's a very nice question. Oh, thank you. Two things I think influenced my childhood, which is, the first was both my parents had come from very religious backgrounds, one Orthodox Jew and one kind of Puritan Protestantism called Plymouth Brethren. And they had rejected their religions. They'd met each other and no one was going to tell them what to do. So I had this kind of slightly radical parents who loved each other, and a big thing for them was self-esteem. And very big for my mother was self-esteem. Even when I was short, like 5 or 6, she goes, speak up, they can't see you, you have to speak up so that they can give you the sweets, right? So it was always about self-esteem, because she struggled with self-esteem. But the second defining thing was losing my mother when I was a child. When I was 16, she had ovarian cancer and died. And experiencing grief as a child really makes you aware, wakes you up, the fact that we are mortal and we are going to die. And learning that lesson that early, in a weird way, sort of liberated me from fear, because I knew if I only had now and I only had this time, so I better use it well.
Another question.
Paula.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I want to say thank you for remembering Sue Benson, who was a close colleague, because I'm an anthropologist. I sort of remember you from the time, because I took over directing studies for SBS when Sue became too ill. So I think we crossed paths at that point. So just thank you. Your memory of Sue is wonderful to hear, and really precious, actually. I just wanted to ask you about the project you've just done about your family history, because I'm very interested in family history and family memory myself as an anthropologist. And I just wondered whether that felt like a different project from others you've done, or is it, in a sense, you're a professional, you're doing a job, so in some ways it's the same thing. Or how was that project compared to others you've done?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for saying that about Sue. I would love to talk to you more about her afterwards. Yes, so Mashhad was extremely personal, because it was my grandmother and my grandfather's story of being secret Jews in Mashhad, Iran. Mashhad is it's one of the holiest cities in the Muslim world. Like, after Mecca, there's a shrine there. There's about 25 million pilgrims every year. And for 200 years, the Jews of Mashhad were forced to convert and live double lives. And I only heard kind of piecemeal family law. But I knew that my grandfather had a Muslim name and a Jewish name. I knew my grandmother wore chador. My grandfather learnt the Quran, but I didn't really understand like what actually happened. And so I made this film, and as I was putting it together, I realized that the surviving Mashhadis were about to die. They're in their 90s. And if I didn't record their testimony, this piece of history would be lost. And the Mashhadis were so programmed for secrecy, so programmed sort of duplicity, because they would die if they were found out to be Jewish, that they never spoke about it. So there's nothing about them. There's nothing documented. They didn't have birth certificates. And so I went to Great Neck in New York, and they're very kind of insular. They not only don't marry like American Jews, they wouldn't marry other Iranian Jews that aren't from Mashhad. They all marry each other. And I went to the synagogue with a cameraman, and my aunt is luckily kind of respected in the community. And she said, "Oh, will you talk to her? Will you talk?" And then, no, I've got nothing to say. I've got nothing to say. And I said, "Oh, please." Yeah. And we set up the camera, and these 90-year-olds just started talking about what they remembered. And one of them remembered a pogrom on Passover. She remembered a mullah shouting death to the Jews. One of them remembered having typhoid. You know, all this stuff just came pouring out. It's only a short film, so it's 20 minutes to capture that history. But it wasn't just about making entertainment. It was about bearing witness to the misconception, actually, that Jews in the Middle East were fine. They weren't fine. There was forced expulsions in 1948. And this is a story in Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, Syria, etc. So it was important for me to just have it documented.
I think we have room for one final question, if there is one. We've gone in so many different directions with the questions. Here's one. Oh, and maybe two. One. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, I know you have children, and I just wanted to know how have you juggled? How have you found, being a mum and juggling your career?
Thank you.
3 children.
3 children. I'm glad you asked me that, because some people find it, feel like, oh, do you ask the men that? But actually, women still sort of bear the brunt of most child raising. So it is an interesting question. I think the question is not what do I do, but it's what I don't do. that's this kind of secret. And I actually don't do a lot of some of the domestic chores, let's say. I don't do a lot of domestic chores, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I have a husband who is very supportive, and we share our duties. And my friend Vicky, I keep mentioning, she actually introduced me to my husband because she went to school with him. So I'm very thankful to her for introducing me to this man who has really allowed me to just be a creative and just follow my nose and my curiosity. And he's at home with the children now, so I could be here with you. So thank you, Daniel.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. You began by talking about your teacher here, Sue Benson, who's fondly remembered. And you've taught us so much about your life and your creativity, and with such openness and frankness and good humor. And I think you've inspired us all in many ways and in different ways. And it's been so worth your coming, and it will continue to flow through us. And thank you very much. And we're now going to let you enjoy being back here and not have to perform, but be part of our evening. And we're so very glad that you came. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.